What's up everybody, welcome back. So we have our AI set up the way that he can attack us, and we can detect hits from the AI as well. So in this episode we're going to make sure that the player can actually get some damage feedback. So we're going to add a health bar for the player, add some impact FX for the damage, and also a bloody overlay if we get hit. So those are the things we're going to look into today's video. So if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, you can become a member or you can check out my Ko-fi page. Both links are in the description of the video. And if you become a member, you will get access to some premium channels in the Discord, and you will also get access to some premium downloads in there. If you do not want to become a member, you're obviously still welcome to join the Discord and just talk about some game dev stuff or show off one of your projects, or if you have a question about a tutorial, you can join as well. So with those announcements out of the way, let's start today's video. So the first thing I want to do is create a new interface, and the reason for that is I want to be able to use the does implement interface check to tell if we hit a player or an AI. So technically we could use the same interface for damage for the player and the AI, and that would work. But that way we still need to cast, and I want to avoid that. So I'm going to create a new interface, use one for the player and the other one for AI. And that way, using the does implement interface check, we can immediately tell if we hit the correct actor or not. So let's create a new interface. I'm going to go to the blueprints folder and create a blueprint interface. So this is my BPI damage player. And let's set up the interface itself. So the function, I'm going to call it player take damage. And then I'm going to give it 3 inputs, and the first one is going to be the attacker, and that's our minion base character. So minion AI base. Oh, come on. So there we go, the minion base character. And then I also want to add the hit result, and that's a hit result structure. And the last thing we want inside of our interface is the amount of damage. So I'm simply going to call it amount, and that's a float. So we have the interface set up. Let's save it and open our player character so we can add it to the player. So let's go to our hero base character. And in here we want to go to the class settings and add our new interface. So let's add one and select our damage player interface. And I'm not going to set it up right here. First, let's do the minion AI part. So let's open up our minion base character. And inside of this character, we have an event for our melee trace. So do melee trace. And we have 2 traces in here for the left and the right sword. So let's set up our take damage event from our interface. So let's start with the top one, which is for the left side. So first I'm going to add a branch in here to make sure that we actually hit something. Otherwise we don't need to do anything. And if we did hit something, I'm going to grab the out hit and break it. And from here we want to grab the actor that we hit. So let's grab the hit actor, and I'm going to use our does implement interface. And we want to check for our player damage interface. So if this is true, then we actually hit a player. So let's link this up to the true pin, plug in the condition here, and then we're going to continue from the true pin as well. So if this is true, first we want to set our can damage left to false. So that way we can only hit once within one swing. So make sure you set this to false, otherwise one swing of the left hand could produce like 5 or 6 hits. And you definitely don't want that. And if we have this set up, then we can simply call our damage interface. So let's grab the hit actor over here, and we're going to call our interface message. So that's player take damage. And that's the message over here. So plug this in as well. And then we can simply plug in the reference to self for the attacker. And we're going to grab the hit result from our trace over here. And for the damage amount right now, I'm just gonna set a hard-coded value of 10, and we're gonna add this to our AI data tables later. So for now this is good to go, and then let's do the other side. So we want to go to our other trace over here and pretty much do the same thing. So let's copy all of this stuff and paste it over here. So first of all, we're going to check if we hit something or not. Then we're going to check if the thing we hit has our damage interface implemented. Then we need to make sure that we set this back to the right side instead of the left side. And then we can hook up our hit result from the trace over here, and that should be good to go. And let me see, from here we don't really need to do anything else in here. No, this should be good to go. So let's compile and save this one as well. And now we could set up something inside of our player so we can have a visual feedback of that we are actually hit. So let's go inside of our player character, and in here we added the interface, so we can go to interfaces over here and double click on our player take damage event. And that will then create one inside of our event graph, and we can work from it over here. So right now, let's not make it too complicated. Let's just set up a multicast for some FX. So I'm going to create a custom event and call this multicast AI melee impact. Melee impact. So we need to make sure that we set this to a multicast event. And then I'm simply going to spawn an emitter. And I want to spawn it at location. And let's see, we're going to grab the location and the normal from our hit result, so we could turn those into variables on the event. So I'm simply going to drag in the location twice because I want the rotator to be a vector, and plug it in like this. And make sure you hook up the location as well. And then let's see, for the emitter I'm going to use one of the minions. So let me check my example project quickly, which one I actually used. So it's the minion melee impact. So let's see if we can find it over here. Minion melee impact. So this one. So that comes with the minion pack, obviously. So select this one, and that should be good to go. So now all we need to do is make sure that we break our hit result in the event take damage. And we want to call our multicast AI melee impact. So multicast AI melee impact. And over here we can simply plug in our impact point and our impact location. So because this is a sphere trace, you don't want to use the location and the normal. You want to use the impact point and the impact normal. And that should be good to go. So now we can actually see something happening if we take a hit. So let's have a quick test with this, and then we're going to continue setting up the health for the player. So I've loaded a multiplayer game. Let's have a quick look of if the impact FX is working, and then we can continue with the HUD. So there we have our dude running at us. And let's see what happens. Well, I see the FX on both screens, so we are good to go with the impact FX. That's nice. So let's set up a health bar in our HUD widget. So let's open up the in-game HUD, and in here let's create a simple health bar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a border and I'm going to put it at the center at the bottom of the screen. And so first let's set the anchor, so bottom center over here, and then I want to resize it, so 250, and I like my health bars a bit sleeker, so I'm going to set it to like 15, and then I'm going to anchor it, so let's make it 0 and then -80, and I'm going to set the alignment over here to 0.5, so it's nice and centered. Now let's set the color and opacity, so we want to set the brush color over here, and all of my borders are black, and then I have a 0.7 alpha on it, so that should be good to go. And inside of this border I'm just gonna drop a progress bar, so drop it on top of the border, And this is going to be my progress bar health. So first I'm going to rename it and make sure that it's a variable on the top right over here. So that's good to go. And now let's make it look a tiny bit better. So first of all, the style that's over here. So for the background image, we want to make sure that it's a red or kind of red. So something like this maybe. And then I'm going to set it to draw as a rounded box. So it has rounded edges and it looks a little bit sleeker. And do the same thing for the fill image, only this time we're going to make it a little bit green. So something like this maybe. And again, I'm going to set this to a rounded box as well. And let's make sure that it's looking like it should. Yeah, that looks kind of okay. So that's good to go. We can compile and save it and then dive into our graph. So over here, we're going to create a function to update our HUD. So I'm going to grab my notes quickly. First of all, let's create it. And that's going to be update health. So in here, I'm going to give it one input, and that's the new amount of health. So let's call it a new health. And that's a float. There we go. So since we need to set the percentage of the progress bar, we need to divide our health by 100. So I'm going to simply divide it by 100. And then I'm going to drag in my progress bar health, and we can set our percent. So set percent. And then simply plug in the result into our set percent node, and that should fix it. So that's really all we need to do in here. So let's return, and this is good to go. Now we want to update our health bar at the start of the game, and a good place to do that would be our player controller. So let's go to our framework folder and open our shooter player controller, because we are in game and not in a menu. So over here, and we have the onPossess event, and after that we call our local setHUD variable event. So this runs on the owning client, and we need to have our owning client to set our HUD. So let's go to this event over here and let's expand it. So over here we already have our in-game HUD, and we're simply going to drag off here and update our health. Update health, and then we can get the actual health from our base character over here, and we can simply get health. So we created this in a previous episode where we did the character selection. So if you didn't follow that actual episode, you can simply create a health variable on your player. We didn't really implement it in our data tables yet, so you're not really missing out on anything if you simply go to your base character and just create a health variable. So there's nothing really linked to it yet over here. Let me see. So it's actually in here, and we already have a stamina and strength as well, but we're not really using them. We simply created this for an example purpose. So if you, oh, I didn't want to replace it. I wanted to find references. So yeah, this is just a print, and in the construction script we're setting it from a data table, but this doesn't really do anything yet. So if you don't have a health variable, you can just create it, long story short. So that's good to go. This should update if we launch the level, so that's good as well. We could have a quick test, so let's do this single player to make it a bit quicker. So this is the HUD, it's no need to test this in multiplayer. So we actually have a health bar, and it's not really filling up all the way, but if you look at the top left, my health this character has is actually 75. So it does match my actual health variable that's on my character, so this is working. So we can go into our hero base character, and in here we have our take damage interface event. So let's go over here. And in here we want to update our new health, so we can simply set it. So let me grab my notes quickly. So over here we have our health variable. We're gonna drag in a setter and a getter. So this variable is replicated, and this event is called by the server. So we already set everything up for our AI to run on the server. So the AI is going to call the interface on the server instance of the AI, and then this will come in on the server instance of your character. So from here we're going to continue. So we do need to make sure that we replicate this to an owning client to make sure that the HUD is working. First of all, we can simply grab our health and subtract the amount of damage that we get from the event. So let's plug that in first and set our new health variable. So that should be good to go. And then we're going to create a new event to update the HUD. So we actually have a few events in here already. So update HUD clip and update HUD stock. So we're going to create a similar event. So let's right click over here, create a custom event. And this is going to be client update HUD health. So we want to make sure that we set this to replicate on the owning client. And then we can grab our in-game HUD variable and simply update health. So we do need the amount of health over here, and we can grab that from the actual event. So we're going to create an input. And then we can go back to our take damage event over here. So we already know this is the server that's running this event. So we can simply call our client update HUD. And that should work. So update HUD health and plug in our health variable over here. So that should be good to go. Now let's add a little damage overlay as well, and then we can test to see if it's working. So I want to add some blood overlay to the screen if we're taking a hit. So first of all, we need a bloody texture to put on the screen, and I just grabbed one from Google. So if you open it and look for open game art, and then type blood overlay, it should be the first one that pops up. So over here, blood overlay opengameart.org. So if you download this image, that's the same one that I'm using. So I'm going to import it. Let's go to UI textures, and I can simply drag in my bloody overlay. And we want to open it up and make sure that we set the texture group over here. It's set to world, and we're going to change it to UI. And that should be good to go. So save it, and we can close this down. Now first let's set up the widget. So inside of our in-game HUD we want to add the image. So let's drag in an image on top of our canvas panel. And first of all, let's rename it. So this is going to be image blood overlay. And then make sure it's a variable on the top right over here, and it is. Then I'm going to set the anchors, and we can set it to full screen. And then make sure that we set all the offsets to 0. So we have a full screen image. And then in the brush over here, let's set up the actual texture. So blood overlay. And then I want to drag it all the way to the top actually, because now you can see the HUD is drawn behind the blood overlay, and I want the HUD to be drawn on top of it. So if you want that as well, you can drag it all the way to the top. And just drag it right below your canvas panel, and that should be good to go. So now the HUD is actually in front of our blood overlay. Now let's set up a really simple UI animation to make it appear and disappear. So first of all, I'm going to go to the color and opacity over here, and I'm going to set the opacity by default to 0. Then let's open up our animation window. So if we go to window over here and select animations, we get a new tab. And I'm going to create a new UI animation. So click the plus sign over here. And let's call this UI take damage. Take damage. No. And I'm actually going to call this take damage melee. So for melee attacks, I want to use my blood overlay. We're also going to create some ranged AI, and I think I want to do a directional hit indicator for that one. So I want to be able to separate things. So for now, let's make a UI animation take damage melee. If you have this selected, then let's see, you should be able to select the blood overlay over here. And then if we go to our color and opacity, we set the alpha to 0, and on the all the way to the right we have this little square box, and we can add a keyframe for this property. And if we click this little box, it will add a keyframe to our UI animation. So that's a pretty easy way of handling that. So now we can simply drag the bar further. So let's see, I'm gonna make it something like 0.15 seconds to get all the alpha. Then it's going to be, say, half a second, so we're at 65, and then I'm gonna fade it back out, so 65 over here, and then another 15, so we're at 80. So over here I'm gonna add a new keyframe for 0 as well, and then I'm gonna go to 0.65, and I'm gonna make the alpha, well, let's make it something like 0.6, 0.5 maybe, yeah, 0.5 should be okay. So I'm gonna add a keyframe for 0.5 over here, and then drag it all the way back to my 0.15 mark, and add a keyframe for 0.5 opacity over here as well. So now it simply fades in, stays on the screen for half a second, and then fades back out. So we have a really simple animation setup for that. So let's compile and save it, and then go to our graph, and in here I'm going to make a small change to my update health function. So first of all I'm going to add a boolean to decide if we want to actually play this UI animation or not. So I'm going to call this melee damage animation. Melee damage anim. Oh, I didn't actually have it selected, so that's nice. Melee damage anim, and it's a boolean, that's fine. So we're simply going to tell if we want to play the animation or not. So let's, oh really, I'm sorry. So let's grab a branch over here, and we can plug in the condition, and if this is true, we're going to drag in our animation, so it's automatically on the left side over here. Under your variables you can expand the animation category, and you have your UI take damage melee. So drag it in, and then from here you can simply play animation, select this node, and then that should be good to go. So you could set this to restore the state, but in this case it doesn't really matter, because we're simply going back to the restored state in the animation. But you can select it to make sure everything goes back to how it was previously, and then that should be good. So we could connect our false pin over here to make everything complete. Okay, so that's good to go, and now all we need to do is go back into our hero base character and make sure that we add a call to this as well. So let's open up our character, and in here we actually created the event. So let's go here first, and we have the update health event. So we have a boolean in here now, so let's turn that into a variable for our RPC as well. And then we can go back into our take damage event, and right now we can only take melee damage because there are no other options yet. So let's just set it to true, and that should be good to go. So we have our multicast event. Let's change this name. I just noticed I didn't do it, so that's my impact normal, just for completion's sake. Okay, so this should be good to go, and now we should have a health bar with decreasing health and also a damage overlay. So let's have a little look at what is happening in game. Okay, so our damage overlay is not set to 0 opacity, so we need to look into that. So our health bar seems to be working, and after we get hit the damage overlay does disappear, so that's actually good. So the only thing that's not working is it's not 0 by default. So why would that be the case? Let's go back into our widget, and over here image blood overlay. So it's actually 0.5, so that could be my bad, I'm not sure. So let's just set it to 0 over here, that should be good to go. Compile and save, and double check. Start the game. So now the overlay is gone, so that's nice. Now let's make sure that it's actually appearing if we get hit, and it does. So that's good to go. So I think for this episode I'm going to leave it at this. I'm kind of having some issues I need to fix with the project. It's not actually building or running in standalone anymore, and I'm kind of confused to why that is. So I'm going to do some debugging and stuff, and I need to take some time for that, so I'm sorry, but I do need to keep this video a little bit shorter. I do plan to upload a second video this week, and I think we're going to look at some hit animations for the player. So we actually have some animations playing if we get hit by an AI. So hopefully you guys understand. This is a little bit shorter video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a like, and I'll be back soon for more. Later.